wanted to call this out because I think that this is such a trigger for so many of the women. It was a huge trigger for me, and it's such a trigger for so many of the women that I work with in my coaching programs, in my courses, my course communities, where there's this sense that there's this energy and there's this sense, and I'm not just talking about a holiday weekend or July 4th as a holiday, but the holiday did trigger something for me. It inspired me to think about the idea of the fact that as women, we often feel like we have to be so in charge of the plan. We have to be so in charge of what's coming next. We have to always think 5 steps ahead. And I feel like that is something that's not actually productive when it comes to nervous system regulation, when it comes to trying to create an environment for yourself that really supports a sense of just self acceptance, self worth, the ability to trust in the universe is going to provide for you, right? All this energetic identity that we need to be able to embody that is really the portal and the vehicle for relaxing, for trusting ourselves, and for really calling in and attracting the type of support, the type of relationships, the type of community feel, the type of connection that we want. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when we don't feel that way, when we don't feel the connection, when we don't feel that that we have the ability to not only give and provide and plan and think ahead, but we also can not have to do that. It's like it's not going to be a disaster if we didn't plan something. It's not going to be a disaster if we don't have the answer. And I've been having these kind of conversations with my clients, especially my one-on-one clients who I speak to more regularly, in a more intimate way, that there's this real visceral fear around not having the right answer, not having the right solution on hand for everyone. And this is a real problem. This is a real problem. And I think that it's something that we need to call out. And it's something that we need to call out in a big way, because when we subconsciously feel like that we are responsible for the right answer, the right solution, to make the plan, what happens is we're trapped in this hyper independent frame, right? This hyper independent energy, this hyper independent identity. And not only, and independence is a great thing, right? But I like to say that we want to be individuals, right? We want to be an individual with preferences, with boundaries, with standards, with point of views, but we want to be interdependent. We want to feel like there's a give and take in our relational dynamics with the people in our lives. Because if we feel like we are the ones responsible for everything, and I do think that holidays and, these kind of societal events that pop up in the world where we feel this internal pressure to have a certain type of experience, I do think that there can be this conscious or subconscious kind of turn on, like a switch that gets turned on, where all of a sudden we kind of propel ourselves into this state where we feel like we have to be responsible for making everything happen. And I just want to normalize that it's really, really, I want to normalize that that's not the case. And I also want to reiterate and highlight how important it is that you really take it in, that that's not the way. It's not the way to be, that that behavior and that way of going about your your life, going about how you navigate your relationships, being hyper vigilant, worried that you're not doing the right thing, you're not saying the right thing, that if you don't initiate, make the plan, nothing's going to happen or it's not going to happen right. I can't tell you how much of a trigger that is for emotional eating, for stress overeating, for mindless eating, for showing up in a way that, for showing up into the world in a way that isn't going to attract what you really are deep down yearning to feel, which is belonging, connection, and true just feeling seen and acceptance and community. Community is even like relationships, right? So it's it's so important. So if you're someone listening to this and you're like, well, that's me, how can I change? The first thing that I want you to do is just acknowledge that that's you. And if you have, and you're listening to this and you're like, that's me, then congratulations. That's huge. And I really want you to just take that in and say to yourself, wow, that's a really big step, that I just recognized that this is me. I remember when I realized this about myself, when I realized that I was the one always overthinking, overfunctioning, always feeling like I had to make sure that I said thank you, that I said the right thing, that I made sure the other person felt appreciated all the time, and just constantly just overthinking, overfunctioning. I remember when I realized that I was doing that and how painful that was and how exhausting that was and how much that made my nervous system so dysregulated. It made me feel in chaos all the time. It created inflammation in my body. It interrupted my sleep. I constantly felt bloated, right? Like there was all these physical symptoms I was having. And I remember when I started to, this is like 7 years ago, I healed my emotional eating. I got my nutrition and weight in a really good place 12 years ago. But the deep inner identity work that has kept me at this place, I really just felt in my soul that I was this woman that felt responsible for everybody, everyone's feelings, everyone's emotions. If I didn't make it happen, it wasn't going to happen. I remember when I realized that I was that woman and I had done so much, of my own inner work, that I was able to hold the space for that part of myself. I was able to hold the space for that part of myself that I knew, my higher self knew, that wasn't okay.